Kansas and Houston both lose back-to-back days. First time in history that top 2 lose at home in back-to-back days when it's cold outside, but the action was heating up inside. Um, which one like, my thoughts on it were Kansas gets absolutely smoked by TCU at home,
Right.
but weirdly, I'm not panicking about Kansas because Kansas I've thought Kansas is good, obviously, and I've thought at times, like, Kansas might have the best resume and is deserving of a 1 seed and yada, yada, yada. I've never felt like basically watching Kansas against TCU, I didn't walk away feeling like I've learned something about this team. They just play like I've said it all year, they're hilarious because their style of play is such that they just, like it almost feels like chaos at times. It almost feels like they're disorganized at times, but then at the same time, Bill Self is such a great coach that you're like, I can't actually sit down and say that like he doesn't know what he's doing because he clearly does, and it's working. And Jalen Wilson's awesome, and they have so much talent. But then other times, it feels like an NBA game. So basically, I walked away from the TCU game saying, um, "This is who I thought Kansas was. Like they're going to have some stinkers along. I think it's going to happen again. I think the bottom's going to quote unquote fall out of Kansas again at some point this season. But it's still when March rolls around, I'm going to look at Kansas in a bracket and be like, yeah, they could beat the hell out of every single one of these teams. So I don't know. Do you disagree? Are you panicking about Kansas after they lose to Kansas State on the road and then follow that up by losing, what was it, 23 at home to
Yeah.
TCU?
83-60 to lose to TCU was their worst loss at home in, oh my god, how long? 2
Two-
years. Right, and I
well,
re
they got smoked by Kentucky at home last year and still
right.
won the national
That's what I'm
championship.
saying,
So
and there's a
yeah,
certain level when you talk about Bill Self. Bill Self is, I think, on his own level as far as tiers of college coaches and the programs they have running and rolling right now. I mean, all the NCAA, FBI stuff, throw it to the side. As far as the results that are happening from the top all the way down to the talent that is on the court, Bill Self has got it figured out. So they did this last year to Kentucky, like you said. They did this to Texas when we saw Texas in the Asheville Maui Invitational, and we thought they might be the best team in the country when they had Courtney Ramey and Kai Jones and Greg Brown and all this talent. So it made a lot of sense when Texas blew them out. Okay, add it all up, whatever. And the funniest part about that is that Jalen Wilson has played in all three of those games. He played in Kentucky last year, he played in the Texas game, and he played in the TCU game. And I think in every single one of those situations, you could brush it off because they obviously
yeah,
bounced back. It was a make shots kind of day. It was a Bill Self, okay, we didn't show up today. I throw you in the pool, sink or swim, and he just let it be. He was like, okay, we're gonna get blown out today. That is
yeah.
what it is. These guys are gonna learn from it. We're gonna be better for it, and it is what it is. I mean, if you're panicking over this, then you haven't been paying attention to
To
Kansas.
Kansas basketball, and I guess,
Right.
like, that's the point I would say to if you're a fan of another team that has Final Four aspirations and, people are hitting the panic button or saying Tennessee's a good example. Tennessee losing to Kentucky, I don't know if it's panic button, but it was like, "Man, this leaves a terrible taste in my mouth. I know it's
Mhm.
one game, but, like, yikes, this is" I don't know, I'm rethinking some things, and if you're a Tennessee fan, you're listening to me say that, and you're saying, "How come when we lose to Kentucky at home in a close game, that now you're off of us. But when Kansas gets blown out at home, you're saying, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I'll tell you why. Kansas is the pretty much runs the exact same they ran last year with a similar roster and a similar
Right.
approach to the game. And they won the national championship last year. So I don't know. I'm sorry. I saw it happen last year. I'm not going to panic. I probably Kansas could be down like 20 at halftime in the NCAA tournament, and I would say, let's see where this thing goes. Let's
Mm,
just wait and see. Let's see
mm.
what and maybe they're down, like I'm never gonna give up on them until they're out. Which isn't to say that I actually do think that they are the best team in the country or one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country, Tate, but I don't know. I acknowledge that the TCU game happened. If it keeps happening, if this like, they enter the tournament with 5 or 6 different losses like this, it's a different story. But yeah, one game where a good TCU team, by the way, TCU is hilarious too because TCU has lost what 3 of 5, and the 2 teams they beat were Kansas and Kansas State.
Right, make it make sense. That's this entire season of college basketball. You look at the results, you try to play it out, you try to see who's good, who's in, who's
Yeah.
out, but it's just changing. I mean, even what, 2 weeks ago, Indiana's dead to rights, and now
Mm.
after this weekend, everyone's like, "How is Indiana not a
Well,
top 25 team?" Right? That is what we're working under, and that is why the AP poll in general has been it,
farcical.
yeah, it's been an absolute joke,
How
you
does
know?
Purdue It feels like every time Purdue takes the court, a Big Ten team is taking them to the brink.
Mhm.
Um, it comes down to the
Literally
final,
every
yeah,
single
every
time.
single
Even
time.
the Maryland game was kind of a blowout, and then it wasn't.
And then Maryland at the end
Right.
technically has a shot at the buzzer to tie the game.
And by
And
technically, you mean literally.
literally, I mean, technically, literally, I don't know, choose your word. They did. It happened. I saw
I
it.
saw it.
Um, Michigan State has Purdue on the ropes, and Edey hits the game winner. Ohio State, obviously, Lawyer hits it. Nebraska takes it. This keeps happening over and over in Big Ten play with Purdue that they are escaping. Rutgers literally beats Purdue. I also saw that happen. Um, and yet you wake up this morning and Purdue is the number one team in the country, and 0 other Big Ten teams are ranked. How does that make any sense?
It
Wouldn't you
makes
think if Purdue is the best team in the country, are all these teams that are taking them to the brink, shouldn't like one of them be in the top 25?
not according to
Or
the
if
AP.
and if that's not if that's not how you think about it, then wouldn't you say like, wow, Purdue has a lot of close calls against teams that aren't even ranked? Shouldn't they be not number
They're
one?
probably not number 1.
Yeah, but no, somehow both exist, and then we just accept it. And
Yeah,
I I think I,
both things can be true.
I think what's happening, especially with the Big Ten and maybe the ACC too. You'd certainly know better than I would because um, it's happening with the Big 12, but, like, at a different level. It's happening at the Big 12, but for good, and then the Big 10 gets, like, the bad part of this where, um, with the Big 10 right now, everything is so results oriented that, and as it should be, it's, one team wins, one team loses. Ultimately, that's what you're trying to do is win these games. Nobody pays any attention to the process whatsoever of, like, who's playing, and this is what was driving me nuts as an Ohio State fan watching Ohio State lose all these close games, 5 games in a row, is that I'm screaming at the TV like, "We're not that bad," but then also how if you're not that bad, why are you losing 5 games in a row?
Right.
But then, like, we're close, but then close doesn't get you anything. You gotta win the damn games, yada, yada, yada. This keeps happening in the Big Ten where, like you said, a team like Indiana starts thinking maybe they're good, but then they lose to like a Penn State, and you're like, "Oh, we suck now. We're going to suck." But now Indiana's won a few games in a row. And now they think they're
3 in a
better.
row. Yep.
Meanwhile, Michigan State was feeling pretty good about themselves. Michigan State loses at Indiana, who's unranked, and now Michigan State fans are like, "We suck. How do we lose to an unranked team?" Basically, what I'm saying is every single game, and I don't know, I've yet to be proven wrong about this, but every single basketball game, I have worked under the assumption one team's going to win, one team's going to lose. Tate, and what's happening with the Big Ten, it feels like, is that every single game someone walks away having lost to an unranked team, and then that fan base says we must suck because we just lost to an unranked team. And then there's going to what I'm saying is Purdue might be the only ranked Big Ten because Indiana is going to lose to who does Indiana even have next? They're going to lose to a team that's like not bad, but because they're unranked, they're not going to. And the exact opposite is happening with the Big 12, and I think that was the point I was trying to make to Fanta was like, I know the Big 12 is the best league in the country. I'm not arguing otherwise. I'm not saying the Big 10 should be considered the best. That's not the point of this at all. It's just once all these teams get ranked high and then they start beating each other, like nobody really falls because you're looking at like a TCU that loses 3 out of 5, but they beat Kansas and Kansas State, and for that reason they're going to stay ranked high, and it's just like a cyclical thing that you get lost in this like you know the cyclical algorithm you've built for yourself. Or like if they keep playing top 10 teams and keep beating top 10 teams and they're clearly a top 10 team, and
Right.
then when they lose to another top 10 team, that means there's, then I'm looking at this like this is kind of crazy. And is this telling us anything? And it's all very confusing. I think that's what college basketball has become. Is I think we have like we go into this conference play with like these set ideas of what all these conferences are, and I don't think they actually are. And I think that's happening with the ACC too. I think the ACC is better than people think the ACC is.
Hey there, thanks for watching Titus and Tate. For the full friend of the program experience, subscribe right below and come join us for all things college basketball. The action is heating up. Come join Titus and Tate.